Ghouls and gals, today I ask you to come along with me as we undertake a momentous task. Today we do not merely look at a single character, nor are we discussing any one event. Instead, we're going back in time, long before humanity was wearing plate armour and riding demogryphs, and when the best weapons it had were rock and stick. We're going back to our roots, to the beginning of the Empire, in a mostly complete and hopefully brief recount of the entire history of Sigmar's realm. Humans are among the youngest races of the old world, and even among human civilizations the Empire is fairly youthful as well. Nehekara was in its prime long before the Empire was even conceived, for example. About 4,000 years before the end times, humans made their way down the World's Edge mountains in their nomadic tribes and began to roam the lands we'd call the Empire. They were fleeing great threats in the mountains. You see, as humans were not only a young race, but they're also quite weak. They don't have long lives, nor are they equipped with great minds or brute strength. Pure incels. For hundreds of years, the tribes in the Empire slowly developed their own settlements. They discovered new technologies like the wheel and bronze working, but even with these tremendous advancements, they were still easy prey for the goblin and beastmen tribes hiding away in the forests. To try and combat this, human settlements became bigger, and the first proper city was built at the confluence of the Talabek and Reich rivers. For now, let's call that city Reichdorf. The dwarves took kindly to their tall, new, idiotic neighbours, and began to teach them the arts of smithing and other crafting workmanship. Humans were slow learners, and they never really reached dwarven mastery, but their advancement was quickened by the bearded lads. Still, none of this was enough to bring an end to the constant raiding. Humanity needed to be united, but only one man saw that vision and stepped up to see it realised. Sigmar was born under a twin-tailed comet, which is already a pretty good sign he's going to be someone special. Also, his dad was the chief of the Ungbarons, so I guess he didn't even need the comet. What a nepo baby, am I right? Before he forged the Empire, young Siggy was already a capable warrior, and saved a dwarven caravan from greenskins when he was just 15. As luck would have it, he managed to save the dwarven king Kurgan Ironbeard in the process. For his life, the dwarf gave Sigmar Galmaraz, aka Skullsplitter, aka the big hammer that Warhammer is named after, aka that big golden hammer every emperor carries around. A few years later, Sigmar's dad dies, and he becomes the head of his tribe. Not satisfied with that, he goes out to see who else he can bring into the fold, dreaming of a united empire wiped clean of its greenskin threat. Through war, diplomacy, or by any means necessary, Sigmar gathers 12 tribes to his cause and has alliances with others. The Battle of Blackfire Pass is where humanity's future is decided, as a grand alliance of the tribes of Man and the Dwarven Kingdoms manages to push the greenskins' threat back into the Badlands. Proving that he indeed was him, Sigmar was crowned emperor the next year, and so began the imperial calendar, or IC as we can call it from now on. The 12 disciples, chieftains, that had helped Sigmar ascend the throne were not to go unrewarded. Each of them was named a count, and the dwarves set to working on a series of swords that could symbolise their titles, the Rune Fangs. Sigmar ruled the Empire for 50 years, personally leading it into battle against greenskins, demons and the undead. He defeated Nagash in single combat, bested Morkar, the first true champion of Chaos, and survived a betrayal from within by Vorkan Jarl. By the time his reign was over, he stepped away from Reichdorf, never to be seen again. To replace him, the Count elected a new emperor, Siegfried I, who died a year later due to a hunting accident. Safe to say, he didn't live up to his predecessor's example. Decades after Sigmar died, word spread that he hadn't just gone to the shops to get milk, but had actually ascended to godhood. A lot of people liked this fan theory so much that it became a new cult, one to rival and even surpass the cult of Ulrich. Ulrich, man's first god, remained strong, though he was mostly worshipped in Middenheim, where the massive temple to him is built. Over hundreds of years, the Counts, cult of Sigmar, and cult of Ulrich further established themselves, forming and solidifying the imperial political system as we know it today. We saw many emperors in this time, but as I'm trying to keep this brief, I won't be going over the reign of each. Know that very few actually had a major impact on the empire or the setting as the whole. 1,000 years after the time of Sigmar, the old world's nations were established as they are in the present Warhammer day. Halflings find themselves in the moot, and a great age of treasure hunting begins when Count Schuvolz of Averland heads to ancient Nehekara in search of hidden fortunes. He doesn't find anything except the vengeful dead, but rumours of hidden treasures still is enough to send people in droves to the Tomb King's realm. Not all is peaceful in the Empire though, as it never really is. I mean, the game's not called Peacehammer, after all. Norscan raids are ramping up in this time, and Marienburg is sacked. Again. Actually, while we're here, I just want to mention that Marienburg is sacked and attacked a lot. Another thing I'm not going to go into too deeply just to save time, but just to assume that basically any time in history, Marienburg is getting sacked by Norscan raids or someone else. As well as the Norscan attacks, new foes come from underground in the form of the Skaven, who show their heads for the first time, hoping to take over the Empire after the Black Plague wipes out 9/10 of its population. The Skaven likely would have won as well, were it not for the sheer amount of corpses littering the Empire. For the great necromancer Van Hel did not want to see a rat infestation in the place that he likely thought was his own, and so he raised a great army to drive the Skaven back. Then, to truly shove them into their dens, Mandrad Ratslayer drove them from the Empire for good, living truly to his name. Even with these enemies wiped out, conflict was never far from the Empire, and in the year IC 1359, the war came from within. For a couple of hundred years, the Empire had two emperors, the elected ruler of Outdorf, aka Reichdorf, and whoever was the Count of Talabecland after Grand Duchess Attila of Talabecland declared herself empress. This led to civil wars ravaging Empire lands, with Tilian mercenaries joining either side and keeping the fighting going for longer. At the same time, there are also large crusades into Araby at this point, which is when we see the establishment of knightly orders such as the Blazing Sun, Knights Panther, and so on. So, a bit of a mixed bag, really, as the advancement of the Empire is held back by this conflict, but their knights now wear a bunch of new and fancy colours. Yay! Things only get worse when a third emperor pops up, creating the period known as the Time of Three Emperors. This third fellow is of Middenheim, and not long after they declare themselves the Emperor, war breaks out between Middenland and Talabecland. To top this hellish period off, there's the Night of the Restless Dead, when, for some reason, every corpse decides to wake up from their power nap and just go out for a bit of a walk. Entire towns are destroyed before the night is over, and the dead aren't just about for an evening stroll, if you know what I mean. Then, just as if things weren't going wrong enough, Gorbad Ironjaw begins raiding the Southlands, wrecking Solon so much that it is no longer considered a separate province of the Empire, and its runefang is stolen. Ironjaw's army even makes it to Altdorf, where one of his wyverns eats the current emperor. The emperor after doesn't suffer much of a better fate, as they die of a horrid poison when invited to a buffet at Castle Drachenfels that leaves them unable to eat while looking at a bunch of delicious food. From here, we enter the Dark Ages, which run from about 1979 IC. At this time, the Empire goes from having 3 emperors to effectively having none, as despite Margarita of Marienburg being elected empress, the Grand Theogenist refuses to accept her appointment, and so the Empire's political system begins to fizzle out. It needs an emperor to create unity, and so without one, it falls into chaos. That's with a small c, by the way, we're not talking the big gods here. Rival claimants try and take the throne, but none are successful. In the meantime, Dark Elves take over the coastal town of Debonit, and the Vampire Wars begin, as Vlad von Carstein shows how much of a threat he can pose to the Empire. He begins by attacking Oswald, and makes his way throughout the Empire. Even death can't seem to stop him, as when he's killed by a member of the White Wolves, he comes back a year later. Finally, though, at the Siege of Altdorf, old Vladdy is brought down, and for good this time. Isabella, not able to live without her sugar daddy, ends her life as well, and the vampires are left in a similar state of political disarray as the humans. Only decades later is a new head of the von Carstein clan chosen in Conrad. Conrad might not be as cunning or as magically powerful as Vlad, but he does pose a similar threat to the Empire, as feuding Empire factions have to come together to take him down at the Battle of Four Armies, which is just not quite as good as the final Hobbit movie. After this battle, the Empire realises it needs an emperor to be whole again. However, the leading candidate in the following election is revealed to be a zombie, so plans fell through a bit there. Conrad is luckily put down at the Battle of Grim Moor, but that gives way for the more cunning Manfred von Carstein to step in. The bold, pale incel makes his way to Altdorf, but fails to capture it, and is himself slain in the muddy Battle of Hel Fen, ending the Vampire Wars. This is just in time for the Great War against Chaos to begin, which isn't actually as bad as it sounds, as it gives the Empire a chance to be reforged. Magnus the Pious leads the Empire to victory in the Great War at the gates of Kislev, and together with Teclis he helps pick up the shattered pieces of the Empire and make it anew. Magnus is later elected Emperor and takes his court to Nuln. Not all is well during this time, though, as Paravan invades Reichland on 2 separate occasions, and the Green Tide is as present as ever. But, for the most part, the Empire thrives, especially as it creates the Colleges of Magic. Not long after their creation, the colleges do come under a bit of trouble, and it's all because of the Night of 1,000 Duels, where basically the Empire Mages turned Altdorf into a battle royale as they fought one another, blasting the city to pieces and getting wizardry outlawed. When Grom the Paunch burned his way through the Empire though, and everyone wondered where the battle wizards were, this decision was quickly reversed. Years later, Marienburg had enough of never being aided by the Empire throughout its sackings and seceded. The newly crowned Emperor Wilhelm tried to take it back, but was easily defeated. The Wasteland's independence has never been officially recognised or acknowledged, but Marienburg has been left alone since. Aachen the Black in 2453 IC led the most recent siege of Altdorf, throwing thousands of skeletons at its walls. This was just a ruse, you see, as Aachen just wanted the Liber Mortis back, and once he'd stolen it from within the city, he left just as quickly as he'd arrived. 7 years later, the Golden Order nearly wipes itself out after a wizard summoned Karanak, Khorne's favourite hellhound. Unable to control the beast, all the wizards at the college were killed by it. Shortly after, we come to the time of Luitpold I, an uninteresting but important emperor as he was the father to Karl Franz. From there, we pretty much know the story of the empire. Franz leads it to its greatest age since Magnus the Pious, and saw it be destroyed in the end times. And so, with all that out of the way, I can say this has been a history of the Empire. Sort of? A bit? Covered the main points? I guess? Did you enjoy it? Are there any major things I ever missed? Do you want me to stop doing this high end to these questions? Let me know. I might try and do another one of these if it's the sort of thing you like, as I like to change things up a lot on this channel. But as usual, please do hit some buttons, and once you're all sorted with that, all that's left to say is see you soon.